We appreciate the opportunity to testify, Chairman Raoul and members of the committee. And we have a few people who are going to testify, each on different sort of aspects, and I'm confident we'll do it in the less amount of time than others have taken. Let me say, I'm Dan Montgomery. I'm president of the Illinois Federation of Teachers, and here representing the We Are One Illinois Coalition of Public Unions. I do want to be mindful of Senator Murphy's request that we say new things. We have testified before. I think we're going to do that today. And that we move off entrenched positions. Because I would put it to you that already today you've heard, insofar as Mr. Fainer or others might say, well, SB 1 should be the base, and we need to save more from there, or something very close to SB 1. That is an entrenched position. At one point, the unions had an entrenched position of, we are owed these benefits. There is a constitution that says you must pay what the state has agreed to pay, and there can be no benefit changes. And we have moved off that entrenched position dramatically to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars, or more than $100 billion. So I would ask that you, respectfully, that you keep that in mind today when you hear our testimony. I also actually would agree with Mr. Fainer about some of his precepts, which was, I'm not going to rehearse them all, but, improving the financial position, stabilizing the funds, freeing up state revenues, balancing the budget. We agree with every one of those. We agree with every statement from people here today that this is an urgent matter that needs solving with dispatch. That's why we are here. That's why we've been working for the last 2 years anyway to try to come to this point and get solution. Mr. Fainer left out two things that we think are crucial, glaring omissions. One is what you should seek to do is also attain some degree of fairness. Fairness has to be part of what you consider. I wouldn't even say it has to be fair. I think cutting retirees' benefits, cutting our benefits in a system that says, no, this is what we've agreed to, it's the bargain that's been struck with the state, isn't fair. But you should seek to be as fair as you can be. And furthermore, you should seek to uphold your oath to do what's constitutional. You do have a difficult job. And let me kind of go over maybe four tenets that we would hope you would consider and be able to follow as you seek to do what you're going to have to do in a report. We think what you do should be legal. We think it should be as fair as possible to all. We think it needs to be an effective solution that actually solves the problems we're facing as a state, and we think it needs to be a viable report that you come out with. It should be a viable report. That's no small feat, but we think we have some ideas that may help. First of all, on the legality, Speaker Madigan's SB 1 slashes the life savings of workers and retirees so unilaterally that we believe it violates our state constitution and will be struck down by the courts, saving nothing and sending us all right back to square one. SB 2404, however, we feel is built on a constitutional framework that is legal. It's a consideration model that respects the Constitution and works within the framework of the Pensions Clause. So we feel that if you're seeking to do what's legal, look to 2404. On the fairness aspect, by now I think it's well known that Speaker Madigan's SB 1 is unequivocally unfair. It would allow the General Assembly to end run the cost of years of misdeeds and mismanagement, knowing misdeeds, by wrongfully foisting the cost burden squarely on the backs of teachers, nurses, firefighters, policemen, and other public servants who've complied and upheld their end of the bargain the entire time. Is it fair for our elected officials to expect that the state needs only to honor its debts and commitments to pennies on the dollar? While SB 2404, in stark contrast, it's true, it includes painful sacrifice from workers. It does seek to minimize the degree to which a teacher, for example, would have to dip into her life savings to bail out the state, while in the aggregate, it does return and give back billions of dollars to solve this problem that faces us all. We think that is some element of fairness. achieving a real solution that can get the state where it needs to be. We would look at 2404 and say that saves $32 billion, $32 billion immediately, $134 billion over 30 years, and we'll have someone in a minute testify with greater maybe clarity or specificity on numbers. Its constitutionality means that we can right the state's credit rating, head the systems toward higher funding ratios, and reduce budget crowding by around, it's estimated, $800 million in 2015, for instance. So we can invest in education and the other needs we all have immediately in this state. And do that rather than waiting for the Supreme Court to tell you to do the jobs that you have said you would do and comply with your oath to uphold the Constitution and legislate a legal solution. So we think 2404 is a very effective solution. And finally, this idea of viability or compromise. 2404 had strong bipartisan support in the Senate. Many House lawmakers were clamoring to vote on it as well. Several public opinion polls recently in the last year of Illinois voters, not union members, Illinois voters, said that they don't believe public employees deserve to bear the full brunt of a crisis they didn't cause. Is it viable, 2404, politically? Yes. And as to compromise, we advocated for an earlier bill that changed no benefits, but did other things to solve the problems we face. 2404 is a compromise between the union's favorite approach and those who would seek to make the workers pay for this mess entirely as an SB1. So, no one, I've talked to many people outside of Illinois who cannot believe that 2404 is the only pension bill that has not been called for a vote in the House. Mr. Fainer's preferred bill was called for a vote. Representative Neckritz, Senator Biss, your bills were called for a vote. The Speaker's bill was called essentially twice in the Senate and went 0 for 2. So even though 2404 is legal, fair, effective, and an embraceable compromise, it's never been called for a vote? Well, luckily, I would say you have an opportunity here. You have an opportunity to heed the will of the people, to respond to your public servants and employees, and recommend 2404 as a report. We can't solve the problem alone. We don't believe we should have to solve it alone. And most importantly, we think that 2404 saves more than other proposals and has widespread support, and we believe it's the compromise you're here to craft. And if, I guess in the end, you feel like it doesn't go far enough, instead of asking teachers and nurses and firefighters to, I don't even want to say dig further into their nests or open their nests to be taken away further, their nest eggs, to solve a problem we didn't create, we would say there are other options to consider. Some of them you've talked about at various times, whether it's pension obligation bonds or tax expenditures, corporate tax expenditures, which cost the state hundreds of millions of dollars a year, billions of dollars. So I don't know if Mr. Fainer and his group would volunteer their services to help you in that regard, but it might be worthwhile asking. So thank you. And that's all from my testimony. I'm going to turn it over to Sean.